So I wanted to talk about these weird ideas that I've been having.
Yeah,
I talked a little bit about that with my previous student. Remember David Slichter? You met him, right?
yeah.
So I was talking to David about this idea, and the way I would like to understand academia is more like a microcosm about how we interchange ideas in general. But we can
Uh-huh.
think about, just to limit our scope right now, we can think just about academia. The way I was
hmm
thinking is that look at the way we communicate in academia. We tend to communicate through seminars and through papers. But
hmm
papers, as you very well know, paper is like a bundle of several ideas, right? And some
Yeah,
ideas could be good, some ideas could be bad. And if you think about the way co-authors form coalitions to write a paper, it's almost like a firm, like they coalesce to agree on some comparative advantage based on several sort of tasks that need to be done in order
yeah.
to create this bundle. So I was thinking, would it be possible perhaps to design a system where we focus more on those micro ideas I'm talking about, those tiny ideas? It's almost like a Lego system, right? Like a system where you can actually put one micro idea and that micro idea can scale up into one path and become like this big idea. But that same micro idea could become a kind of a building block, like a brick to another
Uh,
path, which could go to a completely different way. This relates to a lot of the diagnostics that we were having before, right? Some of the things that I think will help if you have something like that will be the low entry cost, right? Because
hmm
now suddenly, you know, if you and I are talking to each other, like oftentimes we voluntarily we give ideas that are
Yeah,
like micro ideas like that. And to be clear, micro ideas are not necessarily like a positive idea. It could be a caveat, right? It could be,
yeah,
I don't think this idea works in this scenario or something like that. Or I think the best data to apply in this idea will be these other data. This kind of thing that we get a lot of feedback when we present seminars, right? These are the kinds of things I'm talking about. But effectively, there are several advantages. First, you can scale up plurality. You can scale up lots of different priors, lots of different ways of looking at the world because of the low entry cost. Second, you don't need to know who are part of your firm, who is the co-author, right? You just
yeah.
put the idea out there, and somebody who you may not have met would take the idea to the next level. And I am particularly interested in the idea that perhaps that would allow also for more discussions that are multidisciplinary, that come from
hmm
different languages and things like that, because I think this matters a lot. I
Yeah.
wonder what you
I
think
mean,
of
I
it.
think I have two kind of reactions. One of them is I think that the I think that the contribution of research is the bundling of ideas. It is the bundling. I mean, the building blocks matter, but it's like obviously it's just research is just a process of bundling. And in the beginning, the idea was like wheel or whatever, and it's been bundled a million times in order to make whatever electric motor. The second reaction is I think in terms of like other disciplines where they publish much shorter papers on fewer things, right? And it leads to this weird. I think it's almost like a race to the bottom of these minimum publishable units, right? And so you have these MPU. If the MPU is very low, there's not a lot of insight in this stuff, and it also seems very duplicative. There's like so many papers that seem to be about the same thing. Or, I mean, it could just be that, I mean, I'm not a biologist or whatever, but I see all these like, biologists are all like kind of the same thing. There's not a new idea in here.
I
Like, oh,
agree. I actually agree with both points. So just to be clear, so let me use my language to see if I'm interpreting correctly. The second
yeah,
point you're making is that there's even more of an imbalance of exploitation versus exploration whenever people do that, when people
yeah,
write smaller papers, even
yeah,
more so than in our profession
yeah.
with
I
longer
mean, that
papers.
I think is sort of like that imbalance is decreasing in the size of the MPU, minimum publishable unit. And then the other issue is that like if the MPU is too big, then it's just too slow. It's like it's so
Yeah,
so
yeah,
there's
yeah.
some
So
interior.
I agree with everything you said. And also I agree with your previous point, which is essentially a lot of the value involves bundling these
Yeah.
micro ideas. So the problem here is the word idea, right? I would
Yeah.
call a bundling of
It's
several
yeah.
micro ideas a micro idea itself. So the reason why I wanted to talk this way is that we really cannot think about that positively. We have to think normatively about that because it's really hard to judge, for instance, the current academia, whether economics approach versus, say, computer science approach, which is more in line with what we were talking about, will be
Mhm.
better under the current incentive schemes and the current situation.
Yeah, yeah,
This
yeah.
is not what we are
Which are totally
discussing.
endogenous, right? The incentive schemes are
Yeah,
totally endogenous.
yeah. So what I'm talking about is I do think that these kinds of concerns that you're talking about, even though they wouldn't necessarily manifest themselves equally in this new world, in this new design system I'm talking about, there are clearly forces that probably will manifest something like that. Like, for instance, I think it would be something that we need to talk about how to incentivize more exploration and less exploitation. Perhaps not less exploitation, but I think honestly, one thing that would more naturally happen there is that simply there will be more needles in the haystack. By needles, I mean valuable ideas and valuable, again, combination of ideas and things like that. You can even see that in our economics profession, right? Imagine if we put out there not only everything that shows up in papers, but everything that comes out of conversations among two people with a PhD in economics, so on.
Yeah,
So again, to be clear, another obvious concern is that there's going to be a lot of noise as well, and
yeah,
perhaps not even noise, but bad information also. So the thing that I like about a system like that is that one of the micro idea, which again has very low entry cost, will be a person to, like I said, offer caveat, but also evaluate and evaluate based on several different criteria, based on accuracy, based on this is an interesting idea to connect to this other field. It's almost like we are refereeing micro ideas, except that everybody is refereeing. And maybe there's even another criterion that involves consensus, which, as you know, this is almost like the only criterion that currently we have in AI.
yeah. I think that I mean, so I agree. Throw away all the incentive stuff because that's just extra scaffolding. And even at the core, I think it's like a technological story, and you can imagine that. I, you could imagine that. So okay, let's say it's like Aristotle or whatever. The cost of making a book is like a person's life, basically. So because of that, the MPU is extremely high, and you only get really good ideas, but progress is very slow, right? And you have printing press or whatever. You have all these different things, but now be, I think the reason the MPU has gone down so much is because of technology, and I don't think it's necessarily good because now it's like it's more of a model of congestion, and I think you have this congestion of ideas, and congestion is like a an exponential friction. And I also don't think that there's too much stuff being produced that you can't be on top of it all. It's impossible. And I don't even think this is something that can be solved by AIs because it's not obvious that judgment can scale in the same way with the rate of production. And so I can just as easily see a world where we're producing so much research, but we actually are producing less insight per year than we did in 1990 or something like that in 2090.
Okay,
I I,
so
I think
explain to me
it's
something. Explain to me
yeah,
something.
yeah,
First of all, it does look like you're using quite a bit of concept like MPU. So
yeah.
let's define this because I want to understand this better.
Minimal publishable unit. So basically,
Publishable.
yeah. So it's basically what is the so let's say there's like information content or novelty, something like that. I think novelty may be better, and it requires a certain amount of novelty in order to exceed some threshold, at which point it can be entered into the global corpus of knowledge. Okay. And
Why is this threshold there? The
so,
threshold is from the perspective of somebody who is going to impute this data, or from the perspective of
well,
somebody
so,
else?
so in the historically, I think the threshold exists because of actual costs of production, like production and
Yeah.
dissemination. There's actual
Mhm.
costs, so it needs to exceed that in order for it to be worthwhile for the person to do it. And now I think there is some threshold above which there is some vetting process, and whether the vetting process is good or bad, it exists. And you could even imagine, okay, in a world where there's zero vetting process, then the MPU tends to zero, right? You can basically put anything out there. I can burp,
Yeah.
I can burp, and suddenly that's out there. And if you don't think it's insightful, maybe that's just your opinion, right? But this is out there. We do have some threshold, um, and that threshold
So let's just
determines
separate
the
that.
MPU.
So let's just separate that. So good. So let's exaggerate to talk about the burp, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
we discussed this in the past. When I think about what would be the dynamic, coherent ways, the sustainable ways of grow our knowledge, I think epistemic gatekeeping cannot be part of it. By epistemic gatekeeping, I mean we cannot create a gatekeeper in any way about how we impute information in the system. We certainly should think about how we can filter the data pool in the end to
There's a
answer
difference.
better our questions, right?
So maybe I'm
That's a
not
very different
understanding.
thing. Sorry?
Yeah, maybe I'm not understanding what your epistemic gatekeeper is relative to something. They're relative to just a filter. There needs to be something that, from the producer to whether it actually enters the corpus of knowledge, there
I would
has to
call
be
that
some filter.
epistemic gatekeeping. I'm suggesting no filter. As in, the
Oh,
burp is
I
is
think
gonna be
without,
part of the data. No, no,
yeah, I think without
the
that,
burp is gonna be part of the data. But wait. The
yeah.
question here is that the point here is that we don't want to compress, we don't want to limit to only certain kinds of compressions. Of course the burp is I'm just exaggerating, because of course I cannot envision how anybody can envision that this will be relevant, right? But as you know, like any basic idea which nobody can see ex ante as valuable could be
Yeah.
in principle in the training data. Now, the reason why I don't think I want to compress in this intermediate step is because we do not know what 20 years from now, what the kinds of AI systems we might have that might be able to make aggregations there that would make sense in ways that we cannot envision as ex ante in
What if
2026
we
what could
know
be
that
happening.
what if we know there is something that has no insight, like a burp has, we know it has literally zero benefit, exactly zero, not epsilon, zero. And it generates a congestion cost on ideas. I think these congestion costs are real and they're massive. And I don't think this is something that can be AI'd away, because I think these congestion costs are exponentially scaling. You can't scale the agents fast enough to to do that, right?
I don't think I agree with that. And again, I definitely agree with you about the world that we currently live in. But the whole point here is that we're trying to make a non-local move, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for
Yeah.
instance, this goes back to conversation we had before. I'm thinking about how we can create a system that
Mm-hmm.
creates a new type of data set which has a very different kind of structure, right? The kinds of structure that I'm thinking about that this data set will be created on will be, that's a structure where these kinds of wrong turns that you and I are having in our research, the thing that you and I talked a lot about in the past, all those wrong turns are part of the data pool now,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
those wrong turns that will never show up in a paper because it turns out to be a wrong turn for that specific bundle of ideas that led to the paper. As you know, like you carry what you learn from that wrong turn. I carry what I learned from that wrong turn, and that could be
Yeah.
helpful for somebody. But of course, not only I will carry this, everybody in principle. Of course, the problem here is the there's too much noise. But in principle, everybody can carry that. On top of that, there will be people specialized. There's going to be a lot of comparative
So
advantages where
I don't
you
think
might
that
be
people
special.
can. So this idea that everybody can carry that, I don't think so. Like people, the more wrong turns in history, the stuff you carry, assume you have infinite memory. Okay, You have infinite memory, so that's not the issue. The more you carry, the harder it is to make the potentially with enough, it becomes harder to make the next step because you're sort of checking it against the stuff that you're carrying, right?
By
Um,
you mean a person?
a person, an AI, or whatever. If it's going to be used, it needs to be kind of related to what is being carried, right? It's going to be proportion. It's going to scale proportionally to what is being carried. So every wrong turn imposes an externality on what comes next. And sometimes they're positive externalities. And I think that when we're thinking in terms of human decision makers at human scale, whenever we make these wrong turns, I think that that's going to be valuable. Or when we make wrong turns in life, I think those are going to be valuable. But we think about every single wrong turn we made, I don't think that's valuable in life. Then you're talking about these people who are like, I don't know if you know people that are just have this crippling anxiety where they have to evaluate everything they did in terms of this,
But
and they cannot.
again, I don't think what you said is representing what I said. When you say valuable, you are compressing. And when I interpret what you mean by valuable, I'm compressing in a different way. I think, for instance, if you say valuable, it's not going to be valuable, these wrong terms. Valuable under which technology? Under the current technology, for sure, is not going to be valuable.
It could be.
Can
Let's say it could be valuable, but just the sheer fact of having to go through it,
yeah, yeah.
it,
The
it
sheer
that
why are
erodes the
we?
value. That erodes the.
But that's my point, right? So I think we need to step back. So my claim is, can we figure out a way of creating a pool of data? It would be like a modular idea, like similar to a
Yeah,
Lego, where all these kinds of ideas could be mixed and matched, and they can come assembled as a paper or something like that. Like, for instance, it's
uh,
possible that a kind of person will specialize as writing the whole bundle of ideas and put it out there. That's fine. But the
yeah,
advantage here is that now there will be plurality about the degree to which it comes assembled. It's almost like you have an infinite set of journals that are available out there. But of course, the side of the person who evaluates is going to be the same way, because now you will have people as part of this micro idea will be people giving a stamp of approval with their own name, or maybe they will create coalitions like, say, like a JPE, like a famous
yeah,
journal would give the freedom for a particular person, let's call him or her the editor, to give the seal of approval for JPE. And then suddenly we might have papers with 5 seals of approval for the top 5
yeah,
journals, some seal of approval for journals and so on. Or maybe there will be, similar to what happens in movie critics, there are certain people that is going to specialize to be really good evaluators of a specific kind of movie, but a specific kind of type of uh, aggregation. So
yeah,
all these things will be useful data for a particular AI, because now AI can do more of a supervised learning versus unsupervised learning, because now AI also knows what these kinds of people that are evaluated to be good evaluators. Again, one of the micro idea will be whether you evaluate evaluators well or things like that. And every
yeah,
person can carry almost like a score on each of those criteria, and each aggregation of idea can itself have an aggregation of all these scores about
yeah.
all those things.
Sure.
And in principle, you now can do an AI system that can build bridges and just make connections and perhaps even suggest, hey, from the past, it looks like you were a really good evaluator for ideas of this type. So here are some other ideas that you might evaluate or things like that.
Yeah.
You can even have a system where AI could even be more capable of understanding whether an idea have epistemic value or not, because these kinds of ideas are more likely to have uh, emerged according to perhaps a human being that has been evaluated to be a good evaluator, has emerged to be good.
This is not
Supposes
gatekeeping. I don't understand how this is not gate. You have something that assigns potential value to it, and sure, it can get ranked. It can be evaluated also, whether how good it is at evaluating or whatever, and you could go all the way down the line. But yeah, that's gatekeeping. That's something you have to. Without that structure, it's useless. I think knowledge is useless. Like without that structure, you have an infinite supply of Legos and you can never build anything. You just spend all your time searching in your box of infinite Legos and you couldn't build a single thing, right? So Absolutely. You need to put on this structure, and I guess I don't see how
I,
that's just
I, I,
gatekeeping.
will-
That's exactly what we need.
I will not call gatekeeping in the way I define, but I see what you mean. Of course, I think what you're saying is that effectively, whatever idea is going to be filtered from the supplier to the demander of the idea is going to be filtered with a given way of filtering. So if you call in gatekeeper the whole function that goes from the supplier to the demander, then for sure, this is gatekeeping. What I was actually trying to do is to separate the supplier from the demander, because part of the reason here is that some of the ideas I may have I may not envision that they could be valuable, or I may not envision for whom that idea may be valuable. And
Yeah.
of course, what is a paper? A paper is when we have enough of a monolithic situation here where I know a person who values that idea, that person knows me who happen to have the idea, and I know a person who, on top of valuing that idea,
No, you
knows how
don't
to
know.
pass the idea to the next stage and so on, right?
We don't necessarily. I don't think so. Like, there's some information somebody puts on Wikipedia. I don't know who that. I'm not looking in the metadata of Wikipedia to see who that person. I could care less. It's coming to me. Wikipedia through the source through the network of users there. That's the implicit gatekeeper here. It's coming anonymously. It's shooting out into the ether, and then they have no idea that I'm ever going to look at it. Whatever the I was reading about the
I
Holy
agree with
Roman
you.
Empire yesterday. There's
I
zero
agree with
connection
you.
between the producer and the consumer there, but
I
there's
agree.
absolutely a gatekeeper. A very the gatekeeper on Wikipedia is way more gatekeepy than the gatekeeper on
I see.
Substack
So
or the
let me
internet or
try
something
to
like that.
let me try to interpret what you're saying right now. Okay. So of course, what I was saying before was about a paper, not about Wikipedia, right? A
Or just
paper
any
like a
idea, right? An idea, right? We're talking in units of ideas. A paper is a
sure,
bundle of
but I'm talking
ideas.
about no, but I'm talking about how we currently work in academia. The way we currently work in academia, for me to find co-authors, I need to know them, right? I
Yeah.
actually need to meet people. Uh, and they have to have all these conditional situation skills and understanding and value and so on together. So
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like a firm, right? It's almost like a firm. So this goes back to Cole's idea about why a firm might uh,
But what you're
internalize
describing
the
is that, like,
inputs.
hey, uh, we've written papers with Kenneth Arrow because we cited his paper, right? That's the same thing you're describing. I've never talked to him. He doesn't know who I am. We don't know each other. We never spoke or anything. But in the way you're describing, yeah, we did write a paper together, and we have a specific way of attributing things.
Yes,
But
yes. Several of the things that I'm talking about show up in the current academia. Like ideas are modular. Like for instance, there are certain ideas I pick from a previous published paper and I build some other ideas in my paper based on those ideas. There is this standing on the shoulder of giants. What the problem is that we may build on ideas from economists much more so than we build on ideas from statisticians and much more so than we build in ideas of computer scientists.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
the
yeah.
same happens with other fields, and we create silos. So this goes back to multidisciplinary work. I think one way where people can have an easier entry point to any idea of ours is to actually figure out a system where, again, ideas could come bundled. But ideas in principle, one of the micro ideas that people could be specialized on will be on disassembling them. And
I
actually,
think
as part of the disassemble, this could be valuable for another field, which could, in principle, understand those micro ideas, or perhaps they could value one. And in a typical scenario where they would come bundle, they would never have perceived that idea because it came bundled with an idea that doesn't make any sense for them.
so. I think that idea that can be useful if you could unbundle it, and then it could be useful in multiple fields if it got unbundled. I think I think those ideas are very high quality ideas, and those are really hard. And most ideas on their own are not valuable to multiple fields. And so the only way they have enough value to reach that MPU threshold is through some form of bundling. Because we know the bundling is value
I
added
agree
as
with
well,
that.
like we're talking, right?
I
So
agree
like
with that. I think that's
so
your
I
first
think that
point. I agree with that.
I think that it's true that there are those root ideas that could influence many disciplines. It's just that those are like the crown jewels, and those are really hard. So I don't think all ideas have that potential. Some do, and maybe some of those like really big ideas that could and should revolutionize many fields. I know, like, listen, I know that we're intellectual chauvinists as economists, right? And I know we think that, oh, if only these other, especially social sciences, if only these other fields just use this very basic idea of supply and demand or something like that, or costs from economics, it would completely change the entire trajectory of their field, kind of. And and I think it's an extra bar in order to make that happen. I think it and of course
Do you
then
believe
we
that,
get
by the
into
way? I'm curious.
I
Do you believe that?
absolutely I absolutely do believe it. And I think that now we get into these extra incentive type issues. The reasons some of these things don't permeate is because there's a lot of there's a lot of incentive to pull up the ladder behind you, right? So the people in these other fields for which, hey, let's say there's something in biology or ecology that would completely change the way we think about um, how people make decisions. Something in neuroscience that would completely change the way, and suddenly our most of our models would have no value. This is a lot of behavioral type stuff, right? If that's the case, then there's huge incentives for incumbent economists to put the fire out, right? Because you're basically saying all my stuff is junk, right? The big enough ideas and the high quality enough ideas are going to make it in. I think this is what happened with behavioral economics in the last 20, 30 years. Not all ideas in psychology are that good, right? Um, but some of them actually were really good and they made it in there and they have changed things. I think not all ideas in economics are really good, but some of them do make it into sociology and change how those guys do things. There's tremendous backlash among sociologists, and they come up with stupid words and stupid reasons why, oh, this is what an economist would say, sort of ad hominem, but it would totally revolutionize it. I think there's many fields that would revolutionize economics, and many fields would get revolutionized by economics. And that's the only thing that I know of that I have expertise in, but I don't see why this wouldn't be the case for other fields too, right? But it's like
I don't think
that threshold.
I you appear to be saying something that is very interesting, but I don't think I can grasp here. Are you talking about the incentives that each subfield may have to self-preservation? Is that the
So,
thing you're talking about?
so I did bring that up, but that's not the main point I was trying to make. I think the main point I was trying to make is that for the idea to cross, to kind of like unbundle from its field, to cross over and then be used to build up another field,
Mm-hmm.
it's got to be a really brilliant idea, right? And so, like
How do you
most
know
ideas,
that? I'm so you are using. This is the part that I think you and I may be in a different position, because you do know, you have data that the kinds of ideas that did that were the ones that, looking back, they
totally.
were brilliant ideas,
This is
right?
yeah, this is
That
selective hindsight. But
yes.
think about psychology. Let's say somebody
No,
does
no,
some
no.
study.
Let me just finish
Okay,
my
go ahead.
point, because
Yeah,
now, what is a brilliant idea? A brilliant idea will be a bundle of ideas. Now, my claim here is that there could have been counterfactually in this other perhaps system, or perhaps a different kind of system, but certainly a modular kind of system, there could have been many more opportunities for ideas like that to emerge, simply because there are more bricks and perhaps different paths that were created that are at the purview of an economist to see. Like, for instance, there's some ideas, some paths like that, some bricks being assembled, or in biology, some other bricks being assembled in other areas, and like a plurality of ideas like that, where perhaps an economist will be more likely to bring it back. And then if they bring it back and do that kind of merging that you're talking about, this kind of assemble inside economics, then perhaps we would have called that a brilliant idea, similar to what we are calling the ones that are successful as brilliant ideas. So in other words, we cannot just talk about this is like survival bias, right? We cannot
Yeah,
talk only about the
absolutely.
amazing ideas that survive in a system that is perhaps not very well designed to create those ideas. What I'm talking about is the counterfactual world, and that's really, this is why on the one hand it's really hard, because it's very hard to talk about that, because I could be talking a bunch of bullshit here and you wouldn't
Yeah.
be able to falsify me because I'm talking about counterfactual, right? That's why we're trying to understand the logic here, right?
So do you agree with the following statement that two different ideas have different potential for interdisciplinary value?
Yes.
Or
By
right,
ideas, you're
there's got
talking
to be
about micro ideas, or like a given
micro
bundle
building
of,
blocks,
yeah,
whatever you
okay.
want to call it.
Because
Yeah,
at the end of the day, you're right. Like at the end of the day, any one idea at any point in time will be a bundle of something, right?
exactly. So different ideas have different potential for interdisciplinary
Okay.
impact. Given that, um, I agree that it's a matter of that we're making some like type one and type two errors. And right now, maybe you're saying that the threshold for some idea, we're missing out on a whole lot of ideas that could have these big interdisciplinary impacts. Um, and I I buy that. Um, but I don't I don't I don't think that if you basically so right now, so go to the Lego analogy, we have like this Lego kit, this Lego kit, this Lego kit. These are the different fields, and we're building bot things between them. And every now and then somebody says, "Oh, let's take this thing from the race car and put it into the Harry Potter thing or whatever, right?" And we can make an even cooler whatever it is. And I think I think that in itself is an idea, right? That bundling, the act of
Yeah.
bundling is something great. But and you're saying that maybe we need to be moving more between sets or not between sets. I don't know. The one thing I will say is mixing the sets together beforehand is not it's not clear to me that that's going to lead to better uh,
Yeah.
creations out of the
So
Legos. Um,
yeah. So let's actually make this a little bit more precise. So let me give you an
yeah,
analogy, which I think it is not precise enough because it's an analogy, but I think it will help us understand at least this principle of vision I have here.
yeah,
So let's say that you go to a supermarket and you go and buy a carton of milk, right? So the market system is almost like a miracle, right? Because to produce the carton of milk, there has been a sequence of several different kinds of people. Probably they don't know each other. Many of them do not know each other. They certainly don't know me. And yet, if I go there right now because I need to buy a carton of milk, it will be there. So there are lots of micro ideas, let me call it, to try to use this analogy. And of course, each one of them had a willingness to sell for those micro ideas, and they
mhm,
had to be incentivized to build that. And
mhm,
and each one passed the torch, and they don't know each other. And then we have this miracle that suddenly I don't need to create my own milk. I just go there and buy. And of course, that system is very decentralized, and it has this ability that people can specialize on what they are best at,
mhm.
and people can, if going back to that example that we discussed like a few weeks ago, when we talk about that girl from India that came up with this weird idea that turned out that
Yeah,
would
yeah,
have been Nobel Prize winner, but nobody can actually pick that needle from the haystack because nobody
yeah.
knows her, right? That idea would have been out there in the system because somebody would specialize to be, in principle, somebody would interpret that idea in a valuable way, and that person will carry the torch to the next stage and so on, up until
Mhm.
where this idea might show up to everyone in economics, right? So what I was thinking is a system like that. Now, when I
Well,
say
can I just say one thing?
modular, when I say
Yeah,
Legos and things like that, I am compressing, and that's going to be harder for us to even think about
sure.
that. But I hope I now. So let me just say
Yeah,
one
yeah,
last thing.
yeah,
This
yeah. Go
goes
ahead.
back to Cose's idea about why certain products get produced inside a firm, right? It's because transaction cost sometimes is sufficiently high that it might be
Yeah.
better for you to eliminate transaction cost and produce inside the firm. And if you think about paper now as like a firm, what is a paper is exactly, we realize, you know what, I would rather not use the Kenneth Arrow idea. I need to come up with an idea in-house, and I need some person who has the specialization for that. And then I go and call you, hey, Vikram, do you want to write this paper with me? So in principle, we now have technology to lower sufficiently, and this is perhaps you and I may have different opinions about that, lower sufficiently the transaction cost, which would allow us to write papers with a much wider production function where we have lots of agents producing the final product. And by I deliberately say agents here because I don't mean only human beings. You can actually have a lot of specialized sort of AI to build certain kinds of bridges as well. But then the paper, like even right now, in the paper in our profession, even though we get to put our name in the paper is actually a production that involves not only the two of us who are the co-authors, but also the editor, the referees, and perhaps people that gave a lot of insight in our talks and things like that, right? Plus all these people that have published papers before, which we are citing. So in principle, we can create coalitions which will have many more co-authors in that case. And I'm not sure how to even attribute this. This is a complicated effect. In fact, I would suggest a system where you have reputation more so than attribution might be a more optimal system there. We can discuss that. Okay, so now I think I said what I wanted to say to just get us closer to at least what I consider to be a vision. Is that what you had in mind from the beginning?
Well, so I think this sort of market analogy, I like it a lot. And I think there's a huge difference here, and that this difference is absolutely fundamental to idea generation, which is the information problems in idea generation. With milk, people know if the milk smells bad or not. And not perfectly, but I can't even tell if Carol's paper is, we're both economists and I have no idea whether her paper is interesting or good or whatever. I can't evaluate it. People can't evaluate it. And you certainly can't evaluate new things. It's certainly much harder. And I don't think these information problems are solved by some agent will be able to evaluate this. There's a lot of there's judgment involved, right? And you're going to have to load in this judgment. So I don't think that a decentralized solution is necessarily going to be first best when you have this information problem intrinsic to the market itself. A lot of times, like in our toy models, a lot of times the centralized solution ends up being superior, right?
So I definitely see your point. What you're saying is that the production function of evaluation appears to be a much more complex one that requires a lot more of a steep curve of learning than to evaluate the milk, right?
And this market cannot function without evaluation. The market itself does not.
So let's talk. Let's talk. Okay, I understand your point. So let's talk about that. First of all, I think everything you're saying is very damning for where we are currently going under the current system. So this is a point about all kinds of systems. This is very damning for the current system. This goes back to what you were talking before. As we are having more submissions to journals, we're going to have to put a gatekeeper, which might be an AI model, before even the editor, just because the editor doesn't have the bandwidth to get to 1,000 submissions per month. And that AI model is going to be trained on what I would call a very poor data to evaluate things like that. Yeah. So the point that I was trying to make was why I think this is a more coherent approach is that we are also creating a system where it's more likely for people to specialize as evaluators, similar to people might do as movie critics, because now you're creating a much lower you might create a system where right? There will be a micro idea. Yes, but the complexity. So just to be clear, when you're saying you add complexity, what you are saying essentially is that it creates more exploration for a potential AI model to understand what is chosen versus what is not chosen, which is a good thing for the AI model to train on evaluating things. You see what I mean? So there is
No,
also that part that we're
I,
not discussing.
well, it's not obvious that having more of that data is going to be better or worse if the data is bad, right? This is like back propagation, or you can get these. So I think that there's
Mhm.
the two ways to think about it would be, one would be, hey, this is a hard problem, and we're going to be getting a lot more inputs into this system, so we need to have a more refined evaluator, a more refined step between input and stuff that can handle this. That's one set of approaches. And another set of approaches is we need to get we need to reduce the amount of stuff coming into the system. And I tend to believe the more and more I am moving dramatically into towards the direction of we need to put less stuff into the system. And this
Yeah,
is the same thing we talk about
yeah,
news
yeah. It looks
media
like
and this kind of
this is
stuff.
a. I agree, Vikram. So this is good. This is good because
Yeah.
this appears to be a key. A key. It's almost like you and I have different axioms on this. Okay, so
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
just
And listen,
let me
let me
try
be
to enter
clear.
in
I'm
yours.
I'm
So
talking out of my ass here. I don't know
no,
what I'm
no,
talking
no, no, but okay, but tell me
about.
what your intuition. Let's just try to make it more
Yeah.
precise, your intuition. So you think, so let me describe what I think you think. So
Yeah.
you think that there is no, it's almost like your concern is almost like a technical concern. You think that there's no way that we can come up with technology to separate the needle from the haystack. So instead, we might have to figure out a way to provide less
Bigger needles.
hay
Or bigger
from the
needles.
beginning.
Or bigger needles.
Bigger needle,
We need,
exactly.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
the and my
Or it's
and
not that I don't think there's a way. I don't think it can scale. I think
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
problems with this scale exponentially, and or like scale much faster than the solutions to
yeah.
it.
Okay, okay, good. Uh, and where I am coming from is that I think that I am concerned about restricting uh, at the production level, restricting the kinds of needles that arrive, because if you will only allow for the big needles to arrive, to show up, then there will be a lot of blind spots and there will be people that will be underserved. This idea that you're going to get the
Yeah, yeah,
average effect of a pill, you're not going to get extreme
yeah.
effects of outliers, and then people get underserved and so on. So, of course,
Mhm.
needless to say, both of us have a point here. The point here is that there will be some kind of loss function that would involve some form of trade-off, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, okay, now we're on the same page. So now let's talk about the concern, which is again a technical concern, which I don't know, and I don't think maybe I could talk to a computer science to understand how much do we know
Yeah,
about that in terms of the bounds, in terms of understanding this, in terms of as there's a lot more in principle noise coming out. Uh, uh, I understand that we certainly have a lot of limitations with the current technology, but what can we expect with a technology 20 years from now, right? So
yeah,
this goes back to this other point that I was saying, right? Because I think any algorithm, so here's one idea that I said, I think to you before, I certainly said to David before about this. Here's an idea that I think is something that might go in the direction of both axioms that you and I are talking about, right? You want to come up with an algorithm. By algorithm, I mean like a way of incentivizing needles versus haystack, like rewarding or punishing needles from haystack. You want to figure out a way of rewarding needles to enter the system and punishing hay when they come in the system. Because now
mhm.
you're not looking statically for a given training data. What are the chances that you pick a needle
Yeah.
from the haystack? But rather, this goes back to our research on feedback loop, right? Now suddenly you are changing the training data because as people are getting incentivized to provide more needles, you have more
The
needles
dynamic
actually.
externality,
You
right?
have more needles actually in like maybe not now, but 5 years from now you have more needles. Similar to why even people like you and I are more likely to react perhaps more than we were 20 years ago, in part because we don't get punished by our reaction as much perhaps than we used to 20 years ago. Of course, people that are more reactive currently get more rewards, or at least don't get punishment. But also, it's not only people, right? It's like any person at a given moment that they are reactive, they might be more likely to not get punished. And that means overall, this kind of this almost like a, what's the name of the movie? Like idiocracy situation where everybody's actually becoming more reactive and perhaps not as smart as we used to be.
Yeah.
So, okay, so do you agree with me that perhaps this more dynamic kind of algorithm is perhaps a way to reconcile what you and I want? Because you want something that rewards the right stuff. And this is kind of almost like a sneaky way of not introducing epistemic gatekeeping, right? In the way I would define, but perhaps introduce epistemic gatekeeping in the way you would define. Because I am definitely sorting things in the beginning already, because I'm rewarding certain things and punishing certain things. But the key point for me here, and this goes back to the modular part, is that what would be the kind of data that overall will be most prone for an AI system to be very good at specializing at helping us with this evaluation and picking more needles from the haystack? I think the kind of data that I would like would be a data where there will be lots of attributes that will be assigned to not only each idea, and again, each bundle of idea, but also lots of attributes assigned to each evaluator, lots of attributes assigned to all kinds of things, so that when I prompt it, maybe 20 years from now, I want to understand what is the best medicine for my daughter who is suffering from this. And I talk about the exact prompt, and I care more about accuracy, or I talk more about the error type 1 and error type 2, that I worry about false positive. I don't worry too much about false negative, something like that. So then with that kind of prompt, they can match me with the specific kind of information that is more likely that it will be beneficial for me. My guess is that an AI system will be more well suited to do a good job in that situation if the data set was created in a different way. That's what I mean. If the data was not created in a bundle way, because if it's created in a bundle way, I am particularly concerned about the kinds of things that I'm seeing in academia right now. If it's bundled in a paper, it gets compressed. The information gets compressed early on in an intermediate stage. I would like to almost like keep the data less compressed early on, so that it can be used as an input for a future AI system.
I mean, my sense is that that's basically just keeping a lot more hay around. And I think that I don't think that the ability to, I think that sort of discriminating the needle from the hay earlier is important. Otherwise, like this is the what leads to basically like the model collapse of these like these reinforcement learning models, is basically too much hay accumulates, and it spits out too much hay and it can no longer learn, and it turns into garbage. And I think that that's my sort of like first order concern, is that we can't have too much hay, so we need to have this discriminator coming in much earlier. And
interesting.
You know what I'm saying?
No, I definitely understand what you're saying, and I cannot falsify what you're saying.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
I think it's very obvious to me that I cannot falsify what you're saying. So I have a different intuition, and I cannot put a finger on why I have one intuition and you have another in ways that I can just discriminate which axiom makes more sense. So like one way perhaps to reconcile what you and I are talking about is a meta point, right? So I wonder if you and I are talking about something with different degrees of resolution, just because I think in principle your concern can be naturally embedded in my system. Imagine that you are extremely skeptical about any idea that was developed without epistemic gatekeeping in the way that you are defining as epistemic gatekeeping. So here is what you could do in principle in my system. You could go and prompt, I want ideas that through every single part of the stage of those ideas, it has evaluators. Those evaluators must have the following attributes. And maybe some of the attributes you put like as PhD, or maybe you got to put some attributes related to whether they have some kind of status in academia or something like that, right? In principle, then you will have a much shorter list of ideas, which is exactly what you want. You would essentially minimize completely one of the errors. And naturally, because there's a trade-off, you would be very high on the other error. Now, another person may come along, maybe like me, who are thinking, you know what, I'm more in exploratory mode today. Maybe I'm not in exploitation mode. I want to look at ideas that are out there. And I am aware of the fact that when some ideas are out there, they will be perhaps more likely to be not true. And therefore, I'm going to kind of relax a little bit my prompt in terms of what I would consider to be good evaluators here. And I wonder if something like that, as long as you, again, you don't compress in the beginning, it almost like you can have your cake and eat it too.
My concern about that, so I like it, although my concern is that in the part where I'm asking the thing, only give me the things that has these certain forms of status or whatever, blah blah. Those are in a world where the evaluator is assigning that status on the like it's endogenous there, right? In that world, that's I'm not saying it's not better than the current world where status is equal to some very low dimensional function of a few things. Um, but I think we can already sort of do this today. This idea of, oh, I'm in exploration mode. If I'm in exploration mode, I'm not going to look at papers or authors or things that I'm familiar with. I'm like, oh, maybe I am going to go to the Wikipedia on the Holy Roman Empire and see what was happening in 1200, right? And I think that it's precisely like interdisciplinary type things that have happened, or kind of these like big new ideas that are syntheses of kind of different ideas. They happen exactly because somebody was in exploration mode. And of course, most of the time people are in exploration mode, it turns out to be useless. But I don't, I guess, I think we already have a system that allows for that. I don't see why we need a
But Vikram,
wholesale.
I don't think we do, Vikram. One thing is to allow for exploration mode. The other thing is to select the sample of information out there. This goes back to the idea that why I even decided to have this channel, right? Because there's the set of ideas that a person with my way of thinking, the way you think, put out there in the public record is a very restricted set of ideas compared to the kinds of ideas that we're discussing here, compared to other ideas that you and I have, and you and I talk in a bar or things like that. And again, there are lots of ideas that are useless, but some of these ideas could, be, in principle, be helpful, perhaps not to us, but perhaps to the next person who may get this idea and take it to another level. So I think,
Maybe
and this goes back to the wrong turns idea that we talked before, not only ideas that turn out to work, but also ideas that turn out not to work could be helpful to another person, so on. So in principle, again, I understand the concern about the trade-off. I just don't think it is true that the pool of data that we can pick from right now is representing the pool of data that actually is
but any
thought out there.
but
The pool of good data. I mean, good
anything that
information.
allows us to get access to this broader pool of data is necessarily going to be, I feel like it's like not necessarily, but likely to be much more kind of siloed or whatever. Like right now, I don't think that I am better able to explore ideas today than I was in 2005. I just don't, because I'm going to be relying on some kind of, there's so much information out there. And especially if you now say, oh, let's bring in podcasts and blog posts and all this, there's so much information out there. I need to get directed to this by some means. This mean is algorithmic. It's exposing me to way less information than I was exposed to before. I read so much more news today than I did in 2005. And I'm sure, and
I don't
I'm
understand
trying to make
how this
efforts.
is
I'm
the
trying to make,
right. I
I,
really don't. I'm lost here. I don't understand how this is the right
do you
way of
think you're
thinking
exposed,
about this problem.
do you think
No,
you're
no. The reason
exposed to
is,
a
let
greater
me
variety
try
of
to be
ideas
precise.
today? Yeah.
No, let me try to be precise so that you can criticize.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the reason why I don't think it's the appropriate way of thinking about this is that you are almost like a victim. You and I are victims of the world that was created around us, where there's no approach to separate one thing versus the other, the
Yeah,
haystack versus the. So,
absolutely.
like for instance, in this new world that I'm conceiving, in this new world, it's potentially possible that you will specialize yourself to have, let's say, the third idea. You are the kind of person that is very good at picking up the 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 ideas that are still in very early stage and making the next connection. And maybe I'm
Who's gonna
specialized.
find how are we gonna find high quality ideas that are in that third stage? How is that possible to find? Anything that's going to be looking for high quality ideas is necessarily going to be going to some sort of average of
So
whatever's
let's say
right.
that this is true. So let's say that this is true. Okay, good, good.
Yeah.
So let's just say that we live in a world where the third ideas that are just very little assembled will be very, essentially no one can pick. So this goes back to a system very much like to Coase's firm theory, right? This would imply, in my scenario, this would imply that the only ideas that can start some thread will be an idea that is sufficiently bundled already. That's fine. That's fine. So be it. Let's say that you're wrong about that. Let's say that you're right about that on biology and you're wrong about that on economics for whatever reason, right? Then in equilibrium, you will find that the minimal unit of assembledness will be a little smaller in that case.
I,
Uh, yes?
I don't know if I will necessarily find that. Anyway, keep going, sir.
No, 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 it's fine.
No,
I'm trying to understand
so
where you have in mind.
here's something. Maybe here's something simpler. If I so this is an extreme version, but if I want to know, hey, I want to know the third best types of ideas on X today versus I want to know or I want to know the third best book about something today versus I want to know the third best book that was written in 800 BC. I can figure that second thing out for sure because there was three books written in 800 BC, right? So I, that is much more easy to ascertain versus today. Oh, to figure out the third best book about something or whatever, it's going to require some kind of machinery that's going to be able to some kind of evaluative machinery, right? And basically, in order to get what you want today, it requires this kind of machinery to exist. And you have to trust that this machinery is going to do the right thing, or is going to not, I don't say do the right thing, but going to move in the right direction. Whereas in the past, you don't have to when there's less stuff. When there are basically when news about a particular event is going to be kind of very low resolution and sparse, I know that I can basically get the news that I'm getting is something. Whereas now I have no, let's say the news I could get was 60% quality. Whereas today now I have no idea whether the news I'm getting is 10% quality or 90% quality. And before 90% quality news didn't exist, but I have no idea. Replace news with information or something. Like I think that it's very difficult to figure that out. I don't think I am more informed about stuff in spite of being in a more information rich environment, and I definitely don't think I am more able to sort of have these kind of serendipitous discoveries that would lead to interdisciplinary ideas and things like that today than in the past. I think
I
I'm way
agree with you,
less
but
because I'm
I I agree with you, but what I'm submitting here is that this is in part because the way that we interchange ideas and that we process information. Here's my
no, but
point. For instance,
well, let's think about
let me
yeah.
let me
Well, I was just
just
thinking
say one point. In
yeah,
your example about the third book, the problem about the concept of third is that you're fixing one thing. You're fixing a specific demand for a compression,
yeah,
like the third book. And that demand of compression in 2026, it loses a lot more information than that demand of compression in 500 years ago, right?
yeah,
And that matters. And that matters because that is the reason why I'm even thinking about this, right? The reason why I'm even
yeah.
thinking about this is that I don't think we currently have institutions that scales with complexity. As there is more complexity, can we figure out a way of compressing disproportionately less? And that is the problem. We are right now, I think a lot of the reasons of polarizations we have, of even the understanding that we don't understand what truth is and things like that, have to do with the fact that there is no agreement about what is the best third book right now. And there's a reason there is no agreement with that, because people that have different preferences for that,
Yeah.
or people have different situations where the third book will be more important for certain kinds of people, and one other book will be more important for other kinds of people. So
Absolutely.
if that is true, then if you create systems where the epistemic gatekeeping is not flexible enough to get relaxed, we still have so much compression still, and that generates all these kinds of, that's my claim, it will generate all these kinds of polarization. We need to have something that is more, how do I say, more adaptable to complexity. And I'm not saying that the way I'm approaching this situation handles the whole thing, because, like I said, you could embed a potential evaluation system, evaluators, like where perhaps people that for certain situations you would be able to dial up the epistemic gatekeeping, and you only look at ideas that will survive. Only 10 ideas will survive because you are very strict in the kinds of ideas that can survive, and I'm going to do something that 100 ideas survive. This is very similar to Google, right? Like maybe I will look at the 10 first pages, you look at just the first page, but
But
then
this is relying on some form of this is relying on okay, there's many different dimensions upon which we can order stuff, and let's just be able to do it on all these dimensions. It's relying on us being able to discern what is the right dimension, and like I don't think I don't think we can break things down into dimensions like
yeah,
I
when
think
you
this is
say
it's kind of
us, I don't mean us, right? Like for instance, this is the thing, right?
I don't think humans, I don't
We
think
cannot look at
agents, I don't think
ourselves,
anybody.
but we cannot look at ourselves as a bundle of skills too, because probably we will specialize. People will specialize. There will be some people that will be very good at specializing. I mean, we sometimes listen to some kind of movie critics before we watch a movie, uh, and I like certain movie critics for certain kinds of
Hmm.
movie, and I don't like them for other kinds of movies, right? So in
Yeah.
principle, okay, so that again, it's really difficult to think about this when we make such a non-local shift, because we're trying to move everything. Everything is going that direction, and in
I would argue
equilibrium,
that
it's a general equilibrium problem, right?
I would argue the world where there were like three movie critics that everybody knew about and everybody had a sense of who they were. I knew I had a better sense of what movie I wanted to watch than in the world of Rotten Tomatoes, where I'm looking at this some number and I can go through that. I had a much better
Like I
sense in the
said,
world where there was three.
I
Oh, there was Siskel, Ebert, and Roper. There's three critics, and I would read what they said, and that would tell me what's going to be good. I think
But do you
that was a
think?
far
But do
superior
you think
world.
everybody would do that? Do you think, like for
I think
instance,
for the I
you
think
have told me, in different conversations that you tend to be a satisficer like me. Do you think everybody is like us? Do you think that there are no people out there that would be probably looking through to find the critics because they are kind of a little finicky compared
So
to
this is
us.
going to be
They
a little provocative, but I think there were more satisficers in the past because that's what we got.
exactly.
And the reason
Okay, so
and
now we're
the
talking
reason
about.
we've gotten out of this world is because now people have this false sense that, oh, I'm going to be able to optimize because there's this market of ideas on Rotten Tomatoes, and I'm going to get this rating from there. And that tells me everything. It's so much better
Yeah, I
because
think
of
we're talking about
and
right now something that we talked before. I understand it's provocative, but I think it's a good idea.
yeah,
I think this idea of yours that perhaps there is something to be said about figuring out ways of creating a world where people are more capable of handling, not suffering too much when they get something that is very different from what they wanted in the first place.
yeah.
I
So
really like this idea in
let me
general.
say something really crazy
I
now.
don't know how to design this in that way because, like we talked about before, I think part of the reason why people are exactly like that is that they have the whole world stacked against them. I mean, they are probably already
Yeah,
using a lot of their bandwidth to deal with previous problems because they are very different from the norm
yeah.
already. And
Let
I
me say
think
something really
it's
crazy.
complicated. Mhm.
I think that there's and now I'm very much in left field, but I wonder if innovation or knowledge pursuit or whatever would be better if we satisficed in more in terms of that. We don't need the best idea. We need a good enough idea. Let's stack enough good enough ideas, and that in general leads to a more innovative trajectory than something that's looking for the best ideas.
Yeah, that's very
I
interesting.
wonder.
So here's the connection I just made. I wonder if
This is like the difference between science and engineering in some sense. It's like does the car move? Okay, let's not worry about whether we optimize the pistons firing time and this and that. Later on, we can worry about that. But can we get the car to move? Can we get the plane to fly? And then uh, I don't know. I just thought of that, but uh,
so. It's kind of interesting that we're talking about this because part of the reason why we're even having this conversation here is that I think so. Let me just make this meta point here.
yeah,
We are stuck in an equilibrium with academia where I think it's easy to make the case that any smart person out there can pick a system that is better than the current system we have.
yeah,
And yet,
or make marginal changes. Yeah,
because one smart person thinks differently than the next smart person, they design a system that is different from each other.
yeah,
We are stuck with the status quo, right?
yeah, yeah. Or with politics,
So
or with anything, right?
this is the same. Like for instance, I think everybody is aware that the arms race in AI is gonna it's not sustainable. So
Yeah,
something must be done, but we currently disagree of what must be done. Although
yeah.
everybody agrees with the
That some
more
things, yeah.
restricted,
There's,
everybody agrees with
yeah,
the more restrictive statement. Would these improve or not?
yeah.
I think everybody agrees with that, but I don't think people agree with this statement with that. Of all the potential improvements, is this the best improvement?
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Totally.
Which is kind of interesting, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's kind of a weird full circle.
Yeah, but I think it's an interesting topic, perhaps for us to have in a future conversation, because
Yeah.
I think what just happened here in our conversation, this happens a lot of the times with ideas that you and I have with research, right? Which is
Yeah.
one of us comes along and comes up with an idea that is really out there,
Yeah.
and I think there's no discussion. It's almost like what's it called? This the when we tend to pick on our disagreement and forget about what we agree on. Uh,
Narcissism of small differences.
yeah, there's a
Yeah.
narcissism of small differences in part of the discussion because we all agree that
Yeah.
whatever I was thinking there was better than the current situation.
Yeah.
However,
Totally.
however, however, we might disagree on the specific details, right?
Yeah.
And then we pick on that, and because of that, the actual change never happens away from that status quo. And of course, if it's two people, we can arrive at this understanding, and we can say, okay, just let's just rock paper and scissors, let's go with it. That's usually like several times. Again, it also helps that you and I are the satisficer type. So oftentimes I say, like as part of the edits of a paper, this happens all the time, right? Where clearly I see that you have a very strong perspective on something, and I kind of don't care. I say, go for it, or vice versa, right? It happens all the time with this kind of stuff. But if you get too many people on board on this, it becomes really complicated, right?
Yeah.
Totally. Interesting. That's interesting. Okay, I'm going to think more about this, because this is something about. It's almost like it makes it hard for people to improve, right?
Yeah.
So this goes back again to this idea of illusion of objectivity, or maybe this requirement that we have for objectivity is so high, right? Because perhaps when things are subjective, and clearly they are about this, you might want to try to figure out how do you create coalitions, as in how do you go back to the things that are most likely to be objective, as in like for instance, I think you and I would agree here that the current system that we have in academia is worse than the system that we're thinking. But then you and I might think, okay, but I would not like to look at the 10th page of Google, but I would like to look at the 10th page of Google, or at least I would like to have a system that allows for that. And then probably we could figure out a way to come up with a coalition there where we say, okay, so how about we create a system that does have all the way to page 10 of Google, but we create such a tilted system of incentive towards the first page that perhaps I'll be okay with that. That would be a nice compromise for me, because at least I will have the 10th page. Or maybe we can create a system that incentivizes these kinds of people that are more likely to be good evaluators from academia, I guess, to show up more often there. Anyway, I think these are interesting ideas. We can talk about this in the future.
Yeah.
Cool.
Let's talk about it later.
Sounds good, man.
All right.
Bye.